I want to bring in Ambassador Dennis Ross now, former U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East and an NBC News Foreign Affairs analyst. Ambassador, thanks for making time for us today. It feels like the administration has been saying it's close to a deal and talks have been constructive for at least several weeks now. Do you think that that is the reality on the ground, that there's something constructive happening that could lead to a positive outcome, or is it just a matter of trying to strike an optimistic tone that will help to keep the talks alive?
Well, the irony is both can be true. I do think some of the gaps are narrower than they have been. What Danielle said, she identified two of the issues that have been outstanding. I think there's a broader issue, though. It's not clear to me that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza, and now the leader politically as well, it wasn't clear to me that he was particularly interested in a ceasefire or a deal anytime soon, partly because his position all along has been he hoped that what Hamas did on October 7th would trigger an all-out war against Israel by Hezbollah, by Iran, by the other Iranian proxies. And it did not. It triggered exchanges, but it didn't trigger what he hoped was an all-out war. You have Hezbollah, and this is what Hassan Nasrallah said yesterday. We had been waiting because we were waiting to see if there was going to be a ceasefire, and then it didn't happen, so we did this. But that's not what Sinwar wants. He wants an all-out war between Hezbollah and Israel, and what he saw is that that's not going to be the case. So if he was deciding he wouldn't do a ceasefire deal because he thought it might preempt what Hezbollah or Iran would do, now after seeing what Hezbollah did yesterday and the Nasrallah explanation, he may well understand that he's not going to see an all-out war. If that's why he was holding back, this might give him an additional reason to think about doing a deal. By the way, one of the reasons I say there's a little bit of both. One of the things that one of the things that Hamas had not been doing, Hamas had not been revealing the names of the hostages who could be released. Now, one of the things that's emerging from the talks is that they have provided information on that. Now, that's actually a move for them. So we know they've made that move. We know the Israelis have made a move not to end the presence on the Philadelphia corridor, but to significantly thin it out and to reduce it to one small area of the Philadelphia corridor. So neither one of these moves are sufficient to do the deal, but each of these moves indicate that there has been some change in what was an approach to the negotiation. So I answer the question. It's kind of a diplomatic answer when you sometimes say both to an either or question.
But do you get the sense at this point that there is, at worst, panic, at best, urgency among U.S. officials and leaders in that region that this current deal, the bridging proposal that's on the table, that what we have right now is the last best option, and they've got to sort of fast track or speed up trying to get that across the finish line?
Here, I wish I could be more optimistic. I do think that I think the Biden administration, for very good reasons, and some of the people who are negotiating on the Israeli side, I think they do have a sense of urgency. It's not clear that others do, including it's not clear to me that Prime Minister Netanyahu has a sense of urgency about this. I think the Biden administration has a sense of urgency because they're concerned about regional escalation of the conflict. Maybe that fear is not quite as acute as it was until yesterday, although I don't think that the threat of a broader war has gone away. But I also think that there is a concern that they don't know how much longer those hostages who remain alive, how much longer they're going to be able to stay alive. It's certainly not, you can't claim total victory. Prime Minister Netanyahu talks about total victory. It's pretty hard to claim total victory if the hostages who are there don't come back alive. And we know already the numbers who remain alive are substantially less than they were. And we know even a week ago, the IDF recovered 6 of the hostages who had been killed after they were in captivity, weren't killed at the time of October 7th. I don't see on Sinwar's side or necessarily Prime Minister Netanyahu's side the same sense of urgency that maybe the administration feels.
All right. Ambassador Dennis Ross, we appreciate your time and your perspective on this. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.